So Luke chapter 11, beginning in verse 14, these are the very words of God. Now he was casting out a demon that was mute. When the demon had gone out, the mute man spoke, and the people marveled. But some of them said, "He casts out demons by Beelzebul, the prince of demons." While others, to test him, kept seeking from him a sign from heaven. But he, knowing their thoughts, said to them, "Every kingdom divided against itself is laid waste, and a divided household falls. If Satan also is divided against himself, how will his kingdom stand? For you say that I cast out demons by Beelzebul. And if I cast out demons by Beelzebul, by whom do your sons cast them out? Therefore they will be your judges. But if it is by the finger of God that I cast out demons, then the kingdom of God has come upon you. When a strong man, fully armed, guards his own palace, his goods are safe. But when one stronger than he attacks him and overcomes him, he takes away his armor in which he trusted and divides his spoil. Whoever is not with me is against me, and whoever does not gather with me scatters. When the unclean spirit has gone out of a person, it passes through waterless places seeking rest. And finding none, it says, "I will return to my house from which I came." And when it comes, it finds the house swept and put in order. Then it goes and brings 7 other spirits more evil than itself, and they enter and dwell there. And the last state of that person is worse than the first. In August of 1961, the Soviet Union started constructing a wall dividing East Berlin from West Berlin. And this heavily fortified wall became known as the Iron Curtain. It was a physical barrier designed to keep people in the communist East from leaving in order to make a life in the more prosperous West. But by 1989, things were coming to a head. And by November of 1989, thousands of East Germans arrived at the official crossing points. Unexpectedly, the gates were opened and the Iron Curtain came down. So, where there was once only a trickle of foot traffic flowing between the east to the west, there were now thousands pouring across the border for a better life. This is a fitting illustration for our passage. Jesus was teaching that once there were only a trickle of people coming to God from among the nations. But he had come to defeat Satan so that thousands upon thousands would pour over the border to salvation. This is a very big claim to make. It has global and history-defining implications. I know I am endeavoring to prove a lot in this sermon, but let's give it a go. Let's give it a go and see what we discover in the text. In verse 14, Jesus performed an exorcism. Let's begin there. Now, Jesus was casting out a demon that was mute. When the demon had gone out, the mute man spoke, and the people marveled. I have pointed out on several occasions that Jesus' dominion and power is absolute. Jesus' power and dominion is absolute. It extends over both the seen and the unseen worlds, both the natural and the supernatural realms, because Jesus is the rightful king of the cosmos, who is making everything subject to his rule and reign. He is the one of whom God said will crush the head of Satan under his foot. He is the one of whom the psalmist said, "Sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool." He is the one of whom the prophet Daniel said, "To him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom that all peoples, nations and languages should serve him." His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. Jesus' dominion and power is absolute. There is nothing that it does not touch or govern. This is what the exorcism proves. Jesus, the rightful king, was crushing the head of Satan and expelling enemy forces from his realm and dominion. That is what the exorcism proves. Now, interestingly, the exorcism itself was not disputed by the eyewitnesses. That's probably the first thing that we would pick up on if it happened today, right? We would question the exorcism. Was that real, or did you just have a good actor on the scene to help you out? We would question the exorcism, but here in the biblical record, the eyewitnesses do not question the exorcism. They take it that it did happen. They saw something happen, and so they take it that it did happen. So it's not the miracle they want to investigate, but it is the power by which Jesus performed the miracle that they want to investigate. It's not the miracle that they take issue with, it is the power by which Jesus had performed the miracle that they are taking issue with. And it says so in verses 15 to 16. But some of them said, "He casts out demons by Beelzebul, the prince of demons," while others, to test him, kept seeking from him a sign from heaven. So the miracle itself is not disputed, but the power behind the miracle worker is. Some said Jesus was using the power of Satan to perform his miracles, and while others didn't know what to make of this whole incident. They're still waiting for more evidence. Some of them clearly believed Jesus was in league with Satan, and some people just didn't know what to make of all of this. In all of this, we do get a sense that people were increasingly aware and confronted with the fact that Jesus was no ordinary person. They were increasingly confronted that this Jesus was no ordinary person, but rather that the miracle-working power of Jesus, which was now so regularly on display, was driving them to make some kind of personal decision about Jesus. There was a nagging question in the air, begging for an answer, given all the evidence that they've seen and heard about. The question is, would they align themselves with or against Jesus? You've got a mounting body of evidence, you've got your own eyewitness testimony, and so there's this looming question. Am I going to be with Jesus, or am I going to be against Jesus? Would they become his allies, or would they resist his rulership and dominion? This point of decision, for or against Jesus, was looming larger and larger and becoming harder and harder to avoid. And this is true for all of us. This is true for all of us. If we're not yet believers, but studying the life of Jesus, reading the scriptures, and giving the church a fair hearing, we eventually reach a point where we have to make some kind of personal decision. Either we have to yield to the evidence that is plainly available to us and align ourselves with Team Jesus, or we have to explain away all the evidence and align ourselves against Team Jesus. In the words of the British scholar C.S. Lewis, you must make your choice. You must make your choice. Either this man Jesus was and is the Son of God, or else a madman or something worse. You can shut him up for a fool, you can spit at him and kill him as a demon, or you can fall at his feet and call him Lord and God. But let us not come with any patronizing nonsense about him being a great human teacher. He has not left that open to us. He did not intend to. Lewis's point is worth repeating. When it comes to Jesus, we cannot sit on the fence indefinitely. We cannot sit on the fence forever. Eventually, we have to make the crucial decision, either siding with or against Jesus. But there is no middle ground. We have to come to a decision whether we are with Jesus or against Jesus, but we cannot forever remain on the middle ground, because Jesus said so in verse 23, whoever is not with me is against me. Whoever is not with me is against me. Back to the text. It is people siding against Jesus who stirs the waters. It's the people who have made the conscious decision to align themselves against Team Jesus, and they are stirring the waters. Instead of recognizing the power and the presence of God at work through Jesus, people attributed Jesus' miracle-working power to the devil. They look at what Jesus is doing, and they see all that he's done, raising the dead, healing the sick, exorcisms as far as the eye can see, and they go, that is the devil at work. That's their conclusion. We saw this in verse 15, where people said, he casts out demons by Beelzebul, the prince of demons. Now, Beelzebul is code, it is a nickname for Satan, but their point is very clear. The point here is very clear. Jesus, they said, was an operative of Satan and not God. They believed Jesus was some kind of spy for Satan, not the Son of God. Now, as inflammatory, and it is inflammatory as that kind of statement was, Jesus went after the absurdity of making such a statement. It's inflammatory. My goodness, you couldn't have insulted him any greater. But then Jesus goes, look, let's go after the absurdity of that kind of statement. Just think about what you're saying. Think about the conclusion that you are reaching. And Jesus will point out that the statement is so fragile that it falls apart at the slightest bit of pressure. Pressure such as that of verses 17 and 18. Jesus said, every kingdom divided against itself is laid waste, and a divided household falls. And if Satan is also divided against himself, how will his kingdom stand? The point is this. If Satan was employing and empowering Jesus to tear down his own satanic kingdom, how on earth does that benefit Satan's long-term goals of leading a successful and triumphant rebellion against God? How would it benefit him to have Jesus in his employ. By empowering Jesus, Satan would be shooting himself in the foot, so to speak. But as one commentator said, though Satan is evil, he's not a moron. Though Satan is evil, he's not a moron. He knows what he is doing. So it is absolutely absurd to conclude Jesus was empowered by or aligned with Satan in any way, shape, or form, which only leaves one alternative explanation for the source of Jesus' power. If it's not Satan, there's only one other way to explain how Jesus does what he does. Jesus said, "But if it is by the finger of God that I cast out demons, then the kingdom of God has come upon you." And this is where the rubber meets the road. What Jesus said here, what Jesus said in these verses, if true, is of monumental and global and history-defining importance. Jesus was claiming nothing less than the dismantling of Satan's kingdom and regime and the establishment of God's kingdom in its place. Jesus was saying this moment, the tearing down of the Berlin Wall, but only on a cosmic scale, had arrived. The exorcism is proof that Satan's kingdom is being dismantled and that the kingdom of God is plundering its spoils. Yet some of us might be thinking, what is this kingdom of Satan that you're talking about? What is this kingdom of Satan? When did Satan ever have his own kingdom? To answer this, we need to take a broader look at the Bible. We need to zoom out a little bit. In Genesis 11, God, in a manner of speaking, disinherited the nations, all of them apart from Abraham's people. People in these disinherited nations could join themselves to Abraham's people and become part of God's covenant people. They could do that. They could cross the border in trickles and so on. But if not, they were under the control and dominion of Satan. Those nations constituted the territory of Satan's kingdom, which is why Satan, incidentally, was able to offer and present these nations as a bargaining chip to Jesus. The nations were under his control, and so he offers it as a bargaining chip to Jesus. When Satan tempted Jesus in the wilderness, he took Jesus to a high place and he showed him all the kingdoms of the world, the nations which belonged to him. And then he said to Jesus, "I will give all this authority and their glory, for it has been delivered to me, and I give it to whom I will." All these nations that you see, they have been delivered to me, and I give it to whom I will, if you will worship me. They will all be yours. It's a bargaining chip. And here, Jesus does not dispute Satan's legitimate claim on the nations. They were his in some sense. They were his. But the kingdom of Satan was now being overthrown and dismantled. Jesus had come to depose and plunder Satan. He had come with the authority of God to do so because, as Psalm 2 says, he had asked for the nations as his inheritance. The Son asks the Father, "I want the nations as my inheritance." And the Father grants it to him. The nations will be yours. And the evidence of Satan being overthrown and his kingdom being dismantled was the exorcism. right? It's proof that this is now happening. It showed Jesus wasn't bluffing. He's not overselling his case. Jesus is not bluffing. He says that the kingdom of Satan is coming to an end and the kingdom of God has come upon you. This is actually happening. I'm not joking. I'm not tricking. This is happening right now, and the exorcism is proof thereof. Satan was losing his grip on power, and the explanation of what Jesus was doing to Satan is found in verses 21 to 22. When a strong man, Jesus said, fully armed, guards his own palace, his goods are safe. But when one stronger than he attacks him and overcomes him, he takes away his armor in which he trusted and divides his spoils. He takes all his stuff, takes it all. Here, Satan is depicted as a strong man, fully armed and guarding his stuff within his kingdom. But Jesus is the one stronger who attacks and then defeats Satan. In parallel passages to this, Jesus is said to bind up the strong man. That is, he ties him up, puts him in handcuffs, makes him defenseless. He's got nothing on Jesus at all. The theological concept for this is Christus Victor. Christ in his role as the conqueror. He is in his role conquering all the evils of this world. And Jesus' description of his conquest was, the kingdom of God has come upon you. I am here as a conquering king. And the kingdom of God, in whose name I fight, has come upon you. Scholars have debated this phrase late into the night, and we too are often left wondering what Jesus means by the kingdom of God has come upon you. We wonder what that means. Does Jesus mean something like the kingdom is approaching, but it's not quite here yet? Or is the kingdom like the rising of the sun on the horizon, but it's not quite shining in all its brightness just yet? Like, what does Jesus mean when he says the kingdom has come? You know, there is an element in truth to all of this. It's like the sun on the horizon, but it is not yet noonday. It is here. We know it's here. We can see it's here, but it's not yet shining in all its brightness. Certainly not in the brightness and to the degree that the prophets envisioned when they said that all nations shall flow to the church, and many peoples shall come and say, "Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us his ways, and that we may walk in his paths." We're not quite there yet, where all the nations are saying this about Jesus, that they want to know his ways and they want to walk in his paths. We're not there yet, but we will get there. The kingdom has come. Those days for which we long have certainly begun. Those days are upon us. Those days have started to arrive. Jesus said, when he was speaking of Satan's overthrow, he said, "Now is the judgment of this world. Now, not later, will the ruler of this world be cast out." To the Colossians, Paul testified that Jesus disarmed, past tense, disarmed the rulers and authorities and put them to open shame by triumphing over them. Picking up on the same imagery of defeating the strong man, John said in his revelation that Satan is bound. He is bound so that he might not deceive the nations any longer. This is to say, Satan's kingdom, since the time of Christ, is being dismantled. Jesus' kingdom has arrived. And you could see this happening in the text. I'm not trying to trick you or anything here. You can see this happening in the text itself by way of their exorcism. The exorcism proves this fact that Satan's kingdom is coming to an end and that Jesus was establishing his own. The exorcism proves as much. But you can also see this when you zoom out over the early church. The Apostle Paul said that Jesus appointed him to spread the gospel of God's kingdom to all nations, to open their eyes so that they may turn from darkness to light and from the power of Satan to God, that they may receive forgiveness of sins. And then you can zoom out a little bit further, can't we? We have that vantage point of 2,000 years of church history now. So we can zoom out a little bit more and look at the progress of Christianity over the past 2,000 years. And when you look at history that way, it is impossibly hard not to marvel at the way that Jesus has advanced his kingdom. I mean, think about where it started and where we are today. Think of all the nations, the oceans that have been crossed to disseminate the gospel to people who have never heard about Jesus before. That is a staggering progress of the Christian faith. It is a staggering example and proof of Jesus advancing his kingdom around the globe. There is still work to be done. Let's not trick ourselves. There is still work to be done. The 1040 window still exists and remains one of the areas least penetrated by the gospel. This includes countries like Morocco, Algeria, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Iran, India, China, and North Korea, countries that fit within the 1040 window. But given the trajectory of God's decree, they will too hear of Christ. They will hear of his sin-forgiving sacrifice. They will hear of his rule. They will hear of his church, and they will hear of his triumph over all evil. Now, of course, there is one way to digest all that I have said this morning and come out thinking that if Christianity and this kingdom of God is the inevitable future of the world, then it may be worth jumping on board. If this is inevitable, if God is going to have his kingdom established in every corner of the world, then maybe it's worth jumping on board. You know, can't fight them, you might as well join them, right? Especially given the alternatives. The alternative, say, of secularism with all its ideological issues that we see, or even Islam with all its fatalistic and barbaric oppressions. Given the alternatives, perhaps a Christian world is the most appealing option. This is the view recently taken by one Richard Dawkins. He said, "I call myself a cultural Christian. I call myself a cultural Christian. I'm not a believer, but there is a distinction between being a believing Christian and being a cultural Christian. I sort of feel at home in the Christian ethos, and if I had to choose between Christianity and Islam, I choose Christianity every single time. It seems to me to be a fundamentally decent religion in a way that I think Islam is not." So it's true that someone can appreciate the benefits of God's kingdom established here on earth. You don't have to be a believer to understand and appreciate the benefits of Christianity spreading throughout the world. And you may even want to red pill into the slipstream of those benefits, but still remain personally resistant to the King of God's kingdom, Jesus Christ. This too is another catastrophic error of judgment that Jesus would rescue us from making. It is a catastrophic error of judgment to red pill into Christianity for its benefits, but not bow the knee to King Jesus. In verse 24 to 26, Jesus tells of a person dispossessed of an unclean spirit, cleaning up their act, but then being reinvaded by spirits more evil than the original. And Jesus' point is simply this: being dispossessed of Satan's influence without being repossessed by God's Spirit is not the goal. It is not the goal. To say it another way, Christianizing the world and spreading the uniquely transformative ideas of Christendom, whether this is in areas of human dignity and rights, law and governance, and science and education, and ethics and morality, and art, music and literature, and social justice and welfare, and political thought and freedom, none of this is a substitute for the heart of the matter. And the heart of the matter is whether you are personally for Jesus or against Jesus. This is the whole point of Jesus overthrowing the strong man and dismantling Satan's kingdom, so that the strong man can no longer deceive you, keeping you from your decision to be for Jesus rather than against Jesus. All of this makes for a highly optimistic Christianity. It is highly optimistic Christianity that the strong man has been tied up. Whatever he once had claim to is now being plundered by King Jesus. And chief among the spoils are the souls of mankind. The era of deception, which kept the gospel from making its inroads, has ended. Christ has conquered, and now the whole world is the arena in which Christians are seeing people turn from darkness to light, from the power of Satan to God, and receiving the forgiveness of sins. Let me close with a prayer.